Good afternoon and welcome to Policy Matters. My name is Dustin Goverlow, and with us today we have State Representative Mike Nathe of District 30 in Bismarck. How are you doing this afternoon, Mike?
Very good, Dustin. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem. You know, just jumping right into it, you've been one of the most outspoken legislators when it comes to holding local government and local officials accountable for ensuring that the dollars that the legislature is sending down to local government for the purpose of reducing property taxes actually get to taxpayers. Is that message resonating with your fellow legislators? Do you hear a lot more of them reverberating that message to their constituents? And do you think local officials and local voters are getting that message?
I do. As far as the legislators, it is resonating with the legislators. I've written a couple opinion pieces, one in July, one back in January, and it is getting there. Our frustration as legislators in the past, when we did mill levy buy-downs that went through the counties, we were not getting the credit for it. The people, the property owners, were not feeling that relief that we were sending to them. And we always got the blame for the property taxes going up. We did the K-12 funding that resulted in property tax. People are now feeling that. Fargo had a 25% reduction in property taxes, mainly because of school funding that we did. Bismarck had a pretty good number, and the public is feeling it too. So they're holding them accountable. They know when we send it to the schools, which the state is constitutionally obligated to fund, it has to go through there, and if that relief is not being passed along from the schools and passed along to the property owners or the people of that community, they then need to hold those officials accountable. And if they don't like what they're doing, vote somebody else in there that will represent their views, whether it's in school, county, city, park board, or whatever. They need to start holding themselves accountable. And I think, Dustin, property taxes have gotten to a level now that people are starting to pay attention to that minutia that we've been talking about for years, and it's starting to have an effect. We passed some laws last session that made people more aware about some notice increases. You know, if a budget went up by 10% or more, they had to send notices out. We saw hearing rooms at the schools filled. Grand Forks, perfect example. Packed rooms with huge increases, and they listened. They reduced their budget increases. Some people went from some districts went from a budget increase to a zero increase or a very small increase, where the community could live with. So it's all about informing the public. And really, quite honestly, if we're going to see change in the property taxes, it's got to start at the public level, and they've got to let their local officials know. Because we in the legislature can only do so much. We cannot affect some of this once we've sent the money to these districts. It then falls in their lap as far as what they do with it.
You know, and we can go on for hours and hours about property taxes and whether the state should have been involved in the first place, at which it wasn't until about 6 years ago. And
by the way, I was not there 6 years ago, so let's just put that on record.
That's important to point out. And, you know, we look at this every couple of months, something pops up, and we've been having over the last 6 months several special elections for approving bonds. And in Fargo and Minot and other places, they not only have they not hit the 60% threshold that they require, but they haven't even hit 50% threshold. Do you think that local voters have really had enough of their own local officials asking them for more and more as the state tries to pump money in to reduce their property taxes?
Most definitely. When we sent $1.8 billion in education funding, and a lot of that's meant to be for property tax relief, and they hear this and they read about it and then get their statement and don't see it, they know that those local officials didn't pass it along. You bet they're holding them more accountable. So a lot of these bonds, as you say, 4 of the school bonds around the state have failed. And I think it's because a lot of these school districts are overreaching when it comes to these bond votes. And the public is saying, hey, we're not going to pay for these Taj Mahal schools. You know what? We'll pay for a remodel or maybe an addition. You know, we want to have the best education that we can for our kids in the community, but we don't always have to vote for the big mansion type schools. And then, oh, by the way, my property taxes now jump double, triple, whatever it may be. So I think in the past, Dustin, they've been able to kind of get away with that a little bit. Again, I think it's because the property tax issue has been on the front burner on people's minds for several years now, as you say. People are more aware of this, and I think they're more conscious about when it comes to these school votes. And that's why, as you say, a lot of them aren't even hitting that 60% threshold. They're not even hitting 50% threshold. So one of two things are happening. I think they're overreaching, and I think the schools are doing a very poor job as far as maybe explaining their message. And I think the people against it are doing a very good job because they have a lot that they that they can hang their hat on to defeat these measures. So whether they pass it or not, in my view, that is up to the community. If they pass it, well, then so be it, and then they have to live with it with their taxes, and that's their decision. But we did that as a state. From the legislative perspective, we've given them that tool, and this is something that the people in the community can use to help regulate their property taxes. They have a say in it.
You know, without getting into any particular specific project or proposal to levy a bond and fund a project, do you think that the overall issue of all of these schools trying to take advantage of the growth that the state has had, even though it's been short-term so far, and if you look at North Dakota's history, it's all cyclical. This is, at the very least, the fifth cycle of population growth since the beginning of the state. Do you think that we're heading down the road that was taken in the 70s and 80s, which was growing and building new schools in small towns, and on the idea that there would be massive amounts of growth, but then ending up, hitting a much lower number or not even getting the impact involved or expected? Do you think that a lot of these towns that are going down this route are might be setting themselves up for trouble down the line?
They may be. They may see this as an opportunity with the state funding education at 70% now. Times are good. They may think that the public is more willing to pass these taxes, and they're more willing to come up with a big grand school. And I agree with that. I think they are overreaching a little bit. But again, the responsibility and the decision will fall at the feet of the taxpayer. They have to make their wishes known at the ballot box. If the community steps up and says, "Hey, we want to pay for that $15 million school," well, then that's their decision, and you live with it and you move on. And they'll decide in the future if that was a good decision or not. So,
do you foresee the legislature putting any new strings onto education funding to try to reel back in local districts that are trying to basically abuse the special election system to call elections during low turnout times in order to pass bond issues that would otherwise fail?
I see quite a few legislators, including myself, are taking a good hard look in that. Again, I think some of that stuff is self-serving, how they do that. A perfect example, Fargo did not want to have any polling places in their schools the last election. They had a big bond vote here last month. Lo and behold, they have polling places in their schools. And prior they said, no, we don't want it because it's unsafe. Well, apparently now it's safe to have an election for a bond vote in their school. And then they scheduled it to have it during the spring break, and once they realized that, they changed that election and moved it up a couple of weeks so it would have people there. So, I think they're kind of more or less jimmy-rigging the system a little bit so they can get the advantage to try to pass this. And I think it's something that we as a state, we have to take a look at it. I think we need to come up with a more standardized way of having these elections rather than just being willy-nilly from district to district. I really do. Because I think it's unfair to the public as a whole, and I think it's unfair to the debate. I really do.
One suggestion that has been made in the past is that perhaps eliminating the discretion of local governments to sponsor their own special elections and just set up a off-year election, say in November of every year, have an election, and if local issues need to be voted on, locals can take advantage of that. That way the public knows the election's in November, like most people, plan on it being in, and that way there's more turnout, and it's on the burden of proof is on the local government to prove that they need that new bond issue or whatever they want to pass, rather than trying to sneak things through with only 90 days notice or 100 days notice, depending on what the law says at the time. What would you think of something that created a dedicated time for special elections outside of the normal elections and took that ability of local government away?
Well, I think we, the legislature, are willing to look at any and everything and then explore that issue, and I think that's what's one of the ideas that can definitely be knocked around. I'm not in that arena during the session, but again, I think anything that's consistent that makes it easy for the people to vote and helps them understand the issues, I'm all for. So there's going to be, Dustin, I think, several different ideas to address this issue that you brought up, and we'll just have to wait to see how it plays out in the legislature. In your role on the Education Committee as chairman, have you been getting much feedback
as far as whether the changes to the funding formula are working as intended, or are there some major bugs to work out still? And if so, what are those, and what's being done to work those out?
Well, I think overall the K-12 education that we passed last session, where we funded up to 80% now of funding for K-12 education in North Dakota, is working out very well among the 181 school districts. Very well. And most of the districts, majority of the districts, did pass that relief along to their community. Now, having said that, there's always some districts that have some problems. If you're in a district or in a part of the state where there's no enrollment growth, or actually they're declining enrollment, they will not feel the effect as much as, say, if you see a district like Bismarck that sees quite a few kids coming. So there are some like that we have to take a look at, and we'll take a look and see what the holes are. One of the other ones I can think of is some of the schools out in the oil patch. Had to do with Representative Scarpel's bill with the 1358, I believe. And there's some stuff there that we need to take a look at with schools in these oil counties. There's a timing issue with one of them that we need to take a look at, and we've been working on that. So was it perfect? No, but it was a much better way to address education the way we did it. It was a much, much better way as far as helping with property taxes that we did. We did not see this money get backfilled like we did the previous sessions when we sent it to the counties. So, and I'm not surprised with that, because the state controls education. We are obligated to fund education. We're not obligated to control or fund city or county. So, the short answer to your question is, for the most part, it worked out very well.
Do you see a time in the future where state funding for education hits 100%?
I don't. To be quite honest with you, 2 sessions ago, I was kind of advocating for that. Myself and a couple other legislators looked into it. We looked into it for quite a few months, and I came away thinking, maybe that was not the greatest idea in the world. I do think there needs to be some skin in the game, some buy-in from the locals when it comes to education. We're all about local control. The school districts, they can decide what they do. So, in my opinion, at least, and I'm speaking just for Mike Nathe, I think 80% is about as far as I'm comfortable to go with right now. So, and we'll just have to see how. But I think it's going to play out just fine.
And you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but is there anybody of prominence pushing for more than we're seeing right now?
No, not right now. No, and as you know, Dustin, we had quite the battle in the House just to pass the bill to get us to 80%, and that was the main reason why we went to the 80th day and 5 o'clock in the morning. To be quite honest with you, so no, there's nobody saying, hey, let's just go from 80 to 100%. I think everybody's pretty comfortable with where we're at.
Do you think going into the 2015 session that there will be a better plan in place so that it literally isn't an 11th hour issue on the last day of the session? Because a lot of people, regardless of whether they liked what came out of the bill or not, the general perception is that that was kind of a goofy situation, to put it lightly. Yeah,
it was, and I know there were a lot of legislators weren't happy that we went as long as we went, and I know there's a lot of legislators working on issues now. That we're trying to get some issues hammered out now in our interim committees before we get in, and let's have the debate now in the interim. So when we get to session, we're a little bit more ahead of the game and don't have to wait till those last remaining days, because people get a little testy and people want to go home and get back to their homes. So. I foresee the process changing, and hopefully we will never get to that 80th day again.
And is there anything further that you'd like to add to the discussion as far as...
Well, I think when it comes to school funding, I think one of the things that we are working on from an education standpoint is one of my main issues are school ending fund balances, and was something I became acutely aware of, especially after the session ended. And a lot of these schools are sitting on very large ending fund balances, or savings accounts for your listeners, and yet they're turning around and asking for double-digit increases in their budgets, which means the taxpayers then have to pay for those double-digit increases, and all the while the city's sitting on a mountain of cash. That is one of my big issues that I've been working on. I've been very public about it. I've mentioned it in the education committee. I mentioned it in some of the letters I've written. That is one thing that we are definitely going to be taking a good, hard look at. And quite honestly, Dustin, I have a lot of support for this idea. I think it's almost $400 million in ending fund balances that all the schools are sitting on. Now, I am not against ending fund balances. I think it's a good, smart decision to have money in the bank for unforeseen instances. But I do think there is a limit to how much that should be in there, and that's the discussion we're having right now. And what that number should be, I really don't know. I think it's more of a challenge, quite honestly, for the smaller districts than the bigger districts. But those are the discussions we're having right now, and I think people should be aware of that. And that's something we're going to keep educating the public on. Not only school ending fund balances, but local government ending fund balances. How much are these counties sitting on? How much are these cities sitting on? These are the same people that are always screaming in Bismarck they need more money, and all the while they have a pretty large savings account. Now, is that fair to the property owners and the people of North Dakota? No, it's not. But people aren't aware that their county may have all this money. So so we're going to be shining a lot more light on that in the upcoming days, you bet.
Yeah, I remember issuing a report regarding school ending fund balances. I believe it was in 2007, and it was something like 180, 190 million cumulatively statewide back then. So it's not surprising that it would be approaching 400 now. Do you think that the state would get into trouble when it comes to addressing that issue while we continuously hear about the growing ending fund balance that the state has? Do you think that that will be hard to tackle based on the perception of hypocrisy?
No, not at all. I don't think it's hypocrisy at all. It's not apples to apples. Again, the schools have a huge ending fund balance. They're asking for double-digit increases, and that money is not going back to the people. The difference with the state is we have a huge ending fund balance, and we're giving across-the-board tax cuts in property tax, income, corporate taxes, those sorts of taxes. So we are giving our huge ending fund balance back to the people of North Dakota as much as we can. Most of the other school districts are not doing that. So then that's the big difference. And people are very aware of what we have for an ending fund balance. I would guess a lot of people aren't aware of what their city, county, and schools have for ending fund balances.
Well, most people are used to their cities, counties, and schools asking them for more money. So
exactly.
Most of them probably think that they are out of money.
Yep.
Thank you for your time, Representative Nathe, and we'll have you back sometime later.
All right. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.